I believe everyone here who has been cuckolded knows that being cheated on is a very unpleasant thing. However, when my wife was approached by 7 or 8 big guys with toys in hand, I not only didn't get angry but also helped them hold down my wife. This is because I have been reborn into a scumbag who enjoys domestic violence. Despite having a top-notch wife, she indulges in alcohol and gambling every day. After losing all the money, she even decided to send her wife to others to play around with, and at this moment in the room, I found myself captivated by my exceptional wife. Even though I was a billionaire in my previous life, I couldn't resist stealing a few more glances. Su Meng, noticing my distraction, slowly unbuttoned her pajamas and said, "The bed is a bit noisy. Be gentle later." I swallowed my saliva, signaling that our child was nearby. "Let's sleep for now." Su Meng looked surprised because, in her memory, her husband always took her forcefully whenever he woke up at night, without considering the child. In the morning, I woke up early with the intention of selling oranges with my wife. However, Su Meng pleaded with me, saying that we had no money and that I should go back to gambling. I responded solemnly, "I won't gamble anymore. I want to give them a good life." My daughter, Qian, noticed my change and suggested, "Let's sleep a little longer." Although Su Meng didn't believe it, she dared not say more, fearing my anger and violence. When we arrived at the orange stall, I adjusted my marketing strategy based on my business knowledge from my previous life. The previously empty orange stall suddenly became crowded, and we made over 1,000 yuan in just one day, which was almost half of Su Meng's monthly income. She couldn't believe it was true. After finishing at the stall, Su Meng, Qian, and I bought a lot of groceries to bring home. I was gentle and caring on the way back, to the extent that Su Meng believed I could truly change. The three of us returned home, chatting and laughing. However, as soon as we arrived home, Su Meng's smile froze when she saw several thugs standing at the door, smoking and leering at her. These people were my gambling buddies. Seeing them, I coldly told them that I would never gamble again and ordered them to leave. Su Meng felt relieved, but the leader of the thugs sneered and said, "Yesterday, you agreed that if you lost, your lovely wife would serve us well. Changing your mind now? I remember you said your wife's beauty could satisfy us all. We've even prepared for tonight." The words of the thugs turned Su Meng pale, and she nearly fainted from anger. She managed to stand her ground, turned to me with an angry glare, and said, "You actually used me as a bet. I thought you would change, but you're just a coward. I hate you, and I want a divorce." She then grabbed Qian and started walking towards the house, but the men outside quickly blocked her way. One of them grabbed her hand, grinned, and began to touch her, saying, "Stay away from me, or I'll call the police." Su Meng stepped back, and the leader approached her, rubbing his hands together and getting closer. "Since your man bet you and lost, you belong to us now, little sister. You must be tired after a long day today. Let your big brother give you a massage. I promise you'll feel great." At this moment, Su Meng was both angry and anxious. She was afraid and kept stepping back, eventually bumping into someone. She looked back in terror and was surprised to see me behind her. The person who was approaching with a smirk said, "Even your man is blocking you. Why bother resisting? Have some fun with us for a few days and keep us happy. You might even get some money." Now, Su Meng was on the verge of despair. Just as one of them was about to undress her, I kicked one of them and broke his hand. I immediately engaged in a fight with the rest using my combat skills, easily holding my ground against the 5 of them. Su Meng was left stunned, not expecting her husband to possess such skills. Qian even cheered, saying, "Daddy, go for it. Beat these bad uncles." In my previous life, I was not only a billionaire but also a martial arts expert. Dealing with these small-time thugs was a breeze, and I quickly defeated them, sending them running. After driving them away, Su Meng didn't acknowledge me and went straight into the house. I moved to the living room and pretended to sleep, but I was actually wide awake. After making dinner, I had Qian take it to the bedroom. Before going to sleep, Qian, in her sweet and soft voice, said, "Daddy, it seems like you've really changed. Now, go to sleep. Children shouldn't talk so much." Although Su Meng said that, she did notice my change. However, the events of the evening still had her upset. In the following days, I accompanied Su Meng to send Qian to school, and our relationship gradually improved. Tonight, after having a sip of water and preparing to sleep, I suddenly saw Su Meng's beautiful body, and I couldn't resist the temptation. I quickly went outside, but Su Meng, seeing my desire, smiled mischievously. Before I could recover, I felt her soft warmth against my back as she embraced me from behind, her hand moving towards my intimate area. Normally, Su Meng was shy and passive, but today, for some reason, she wanted to take the initiative. Her hand moved slowly and firmly, and I couldn't help but swallow hard. Su Meng noticed something was wrong and asked me what was going on. She suggested getting an air conditioner because of the heat. I agreed, and she obediently withdrew her hand, ending our exciting game. Due to my scoundrel nature in my previous life, Su Meng's family never approved of our marriage. While Su Meng's family wasn't wealthy, they had some assets. Over the years, Su Meng had silently endured my domestic abuse. The next morning, Su Meng woke up early to complete some paperwork for Qian Qian. While I was selling oranges, I received a call from Su Meng. She sounded panicked and tearful, saying, "Honey, come to the hospital quickly." Something happened to Qian Qian. When I arrived at the hospital, Su Meng's family was already there. Upon seeing me, Su Meng's father, Su Jingqi, didn't hesitate to give me a strong slap. Su Meng's mother, Gu Manru, spoke up, "Your daughter has a kidney problem, and you didn't even know. You're useless." I was stunned. How could such a lively child like Qian Qian have kidney problems? Su Meng, with red eyes, stood in front of them and said, "Mom, this has nothing to do with Zuizhang. This illness was difficult to diagnose from the beginning. Don't mention that it's useless. Let me ask you, have you ever taken Cici to the hospital for a checkup from childhood to now?" Su Meng lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. She replied, "Before, I didn't really care about them, and we were gambling and drinking all the time. Even meals were a problem, let alone medical checkups." I thought about the past and could only shake my head in frustration. After a while, I asked, "What's the current situation with Cici?" "She has acute kidney disease. Until we find a suitable kidney source, she'll have to rely on dialysis to stay alive. The medical expenses are high every day. How will you afford it?" Su Meng's words left me stunned. I had no idea the illness was this severe. Seeing Su Meng crying, she turned to her father and said in a pitiful tone, "Dad, please lend us some money. We'll definitely pay it back." Su Jingqi, without even looking at her, replied, "Borrowing money is impossible, unless you two get a divorce." Su Meng was shocked. "Why are you forcing us to divorce? Don't you know what kind of person Chen Zuizhang is? Even if I married him, I'm not ashamed. He's my husband, and he's changed a lot." Su Meng tried to defend me, but Gu Manru sighed heavily, and with her parents in agreement, there was nothing Su Meng could do. She then looked to her older brother, but Su Hai ignored her pleading gaze. The united front of her family left Su Meng completely devastated, and she burst into tears, saying, "Do you want to push me to my death? Cici is also your granddaughter." I finally understood what was happening. It seemed that Su's family intended to use Cici's illness to pressure us into getting a divorce. I didn't care about Su's family looking down on me, but now they were using Cici's life as leverage. In my previous life, I had earned $1 billion fortune through my own efforts, and I had my pride. I stepped forward, hugged Su Meng tightly, and said in a determined voice, "We'll handle Cici's illness on our own. We don't need your help. Don't use our child as a bargaining chip to force us to divorce." Su Jingqi angrily retorted, "Fine, you can deal with it yourself. We're leaving." He, Gu Manru, and Su Hai turned and walked away. After they left, Su Meng couldn't hold back her tears. Why do they want to force us to divorce? Don't they care about Cici, who's lying in the hospital bed? Are they heartless? I gently patted her shoulder and said, "Su Meng, don't worry. We'll find a solution. I'll take care of it." I had a plan that wasn't just empty words. In my previous life, I had seen someone sell an antique cup at an auction for 2 million. After consoling Su Meng for a while, I immediately went to buy the antique cup. With this cup, I had a way to raise the necessary funds. When I returned to the hospital, I overheard Su Meng arguing with the nurse. She was saying, "There must be a problem with your hospital. We've already paid the medical expenses." The nurse remained calm and replied, "Madam, if the hospital received the payment, there would be a record of it. We haven't received your remittance." Su Meng's face turned pale upon hearing this. She looked at me and asked, "Didn't I ask you to pay Cici's medical bills? Where's the money?" I shook the cup in my hand and explained, "I used the money to buy this." "Don't worry, Chen Zuizhang. Do you know that this cup is worth a lot of money?" Su Meng was furious, her face turning red as she grabbed my collar. Chen Zuizheng, do you realize that this money was meant for Cece's medical treatment? You actually used Cece's life-saving money to buy this worthless thing. I knew Su Meng was angry, so I patiently explained, listen to me, this cup is valuable. I'll sell it tomorrow, and then we'll have not only the medical expenses covered but also the future costs of Cece's treatment. Disappointed, Su Meng looked at me and said, Chen Zuizheng, I thought the best version of you had returned, but now I see I was mistaken. However, I didn't know how to explain this situation further. Who could have expected that this seemingly inconspicuous cup was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? At that moment, Cece woke up. She wanted to move her body, but she was filled with various tubes and needles, unable to do so. Daddy, Cece feels so uncomfortable, she said helplessly, looking at me with her innocent eyes. At that moment, I felt my heart breaking and had to quickly leave the room. That night, when Su Meng opened her eyes, she saw Cece lying on the bed, silently crying. What's wrong with Cece? Is she in a lot of pain? She asked. Concerned, Cece shook her head and wiped her tears away. She asked seriously, Mom, can you stop hating Daddy? Su Meng was puzzled by her daughter's words and asked, why do you say that, dear? What happened, Mom? I heard you and Daddy arguing this afternoon. Daddy must have a plan. Mom, please don't hate Daddy, Cece said earnestly. Su Meng gently stroked Cece's fluffy head and said, Cece, Mommy loves both you and Daddy the most. Just like you said, let's trust that Daddy has a plan. Cece smiled and nodded, snuggling up in Su Meng's arms before falling asleep. The next day, Su Hai entered the room with breakfast and fruits. Seeing him, Su Meng said, Brother, I need to step out for a moment. Please take care of Cece for me. Su Hai frowned and asked, why do you need to go out at a time like this? Are you planning to borrow money? Su Meng didn't reply, but she walked out of the room and headed for the fire escape. She glanced around and then took out a small card she had found in the hospital restroom. The card had only 4 words written on it, sell kidney for a high price. She dialed the number. And a voice on the other end asked, where did you get our contact from? Su Meng nervously explained, I found it in the hospital restroom, and I'm currently at the hospital. If you're concerned, I can come to you. The person on the other end gave her an address, and Su Meng followed it to an abandoned factory. She was nervous but determined. Inside the factory, she met a person wearing a white coat with a wolfish expression. That person said, 1 kidney for 25,000, or 60,000 for both. Let's start with 1. Su Meng's voice trembled as she agreed. The organ trafficker, with a wicked smile, thought about how exceptional this prey was and decided to have some fun. Afterward, the trafficker took Su Meng for an examination and began the surgery. In his mind, he couldn't wait to savor this extraordinary catch. These past few days, the private collector was supposed to come here. However, after waiting for half a day, there was still no sign of him. By the afternoon, a man dressed in a suit and wearing a beret was seen browsing around the stalls of street vendors. His name was Du Jingtao. Influenced by his father, he had been exposed to various antiques since childhood. He had furthered his knowledge of ancient artifacts in China and had recently returned from studying abroad. However, instead of immediately participating in major auctions upon his return, Du Jingtao chose to frequent these small street vendors. To a professional like him, these places were the best. The unknowing vendors had no idea how valuable the treasures they held were, but Du Jingtao could spot them with just one glance. During this time, he had discovered quite a few valuable items. At that moment, Chen Zuizheng approached him and introduced himself. Hello, Mr. Du, my name is Chen Zuizheng. Du Jingtao was momentarily puzzled and looked at Chen Zuizheng with some curiosity. May I ask who you are? Chen Zuizheng smiled and took out the antique cup from his pocket, saying in a low voice, I heard that you have a keen eye for antiques. I wonder if this cup catches your interest. Du Jingtao hesitated for a moment, then took the cup from Chen Zuizheng's hand. After a quick examination, he became visibly excited. This is a Royal Imperial Cup. Mr. Chen, you have a discerning eye. I must say I've found the right person. So, what price are you looking for? 300,000, Chen Zuizheng replied truthfully. 300,000. Du Jingtao seemed somewhat reluctant. After shaking his head, he continued, although this is a Royal Imperial Cup, 300,000 is too high. Chen Zuizheng heard this and felt disappointed. After all, when he acquired the cup, he sold it for 3 million. Offering it for 30 million was already quite reasonable. What's your offer then? Chen Zuizheng asked. After some contemplation, Du Jingtao raised one finger, indicating a price of 100,000, at most. 100,000. Chen Zuizheng hadn't expected the offer to be reduced so drastically. While he might have overlooked it in normal circumstances, he couldn't afford to make significant concessions this time. The money was meant for Cece's medical treatment. After a moment of thought, Chen Zuizheng spoke with a sincere tone. You clearly have a good eye for antiques. The price you're offering doesn't do justice to the value of this cup. Can you consider raising it a bit? Du Jingtao smiled and replied, my friend, although I have a good eye, it doesn't mean I'll buy everything. Do you know why I come to places like this? It's because many of the owners are outsiders who are unaware of the true value of their items. I can purchase these priceless treasures at very low prices. 100,000 is already the highest I can offer. You see, with that, Du Jingtao smiled at Chen Zuizheng. Chen Zuizheng couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that Du Jingtao wouldn't go any higher with his offer. This time, he had made a mistake.